Hello, Yelizaveta.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to
Hi.
meet you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's going to be an interesting conversation, I think, because I feel like it's the first time I do a meta interview. So, in the sense that I interview someone who also does interviews.
Yes.
So I don't think I've ever done that before. I've done so many interviews until now that I may have actually missing one of them. But as far as I can remember, this is the first time I do that. So it's going to be an interesting opportunity to not only talk about something interesting for my audience and possibly your audience, but also just reflect on my on some of my own questions that I sometimes ask myself and have no one to ask to because there's not really a lot of people doing this, and then somehow you
Yeah,
find
yeah,
someone else who does, and that's interesting.
totally.
But just for those who don't know you, can you maybe give us a short summary of who you are and what you do in tango?
Sure, sure. So I am a tango teacher here in the States. I live in Los Angeles. I'm also a content creator, so I'm doing a lot of content on Instagram and I publish on my YouTube channel. I have a podcast, and my podcast is the Tango Banter that I started a couple of years ago. It's a weekly podcast that I publish on Tuesdays. Um, that's in terms of, sort of some of my online content work. But as a teacher, also, I'm here in LA, mostly specializing in working with women and teaching women to lead. So I have a community of women called Chicas del Tango. And we have monthly practicas, and I host a group, and we just sort of focus on developing our leading skills and learning from each other and fostering that connection between women. So a lot of my work in tango kind of centers around uh, general empowering dancers to um, really go after what they want at the milonga and like really get the dances that they want. Because I think a lot of times we get lost a lot in technique and sort of aspiring to be like someone else. And so with a lot of the dancers that I work with, it's this focus of like looking for their own expression, their musicality, their style, and sort of finding that freedom and more specifically helping the community in terms of balancing out the gender imbalance that we have with there being so many female followers and not enough male leaders, and just really addressing that in a practical way and training new people to lead, new women to come up in the ranks and sort of serve that role in the community because it's really necessary. So that's kind of in a nutshell where I'm dwelling every day. Yeah.
So it's quite versatile because most people are pretty much who are tango teachers, and it's already a lot of work. But you're also
Yeah.
doing other things at the same time.
Yeah, I kind of feel that it's necessary in some ways as a teacher because I'm not necessarily a very conventional teacher. I don't specialize necessarily in um, really teaching tango as like an art form. So I don't perform. I'm not a really like versatile performer traveling on in the world of festivals and kind of pushing myself in that direction. I think I'm kind of unconventional in terms of as a dancer. I don't dance in heels. I only dance in flats. So for me, I think for me to be acknowledged or visible or like for people to actually get to know value of what I teach, it was like really necessary to connect with people online and like get my sort of my work out there in different ways. So
Sorry, why
I
was it
know that
necessary?
why?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, like otherwise people didn't know about me.
Okay.
It's like because I don't for a lot of teachers, like the model of becoming a tango teacher is like you start teaching, maybe you start a school, you start your group, then you travel, you perform, you tour, and you kind of build your career in that way. And that I just knew very early on that that's just not me. I don't. That's I don't enjoy that, but I really enjoy teaching. That's like my thing. I love teaching, and it felt like going online and really doing a lot of this content creation was a pathway for me to like teach and share what I know, and in that way for people to get to know my work. And the banter kind of came out of that because what I observed for a lot of people, for a lot of dancers, they might have the piece, the technical piece, like they might have the, they work hard, they go to class, they take, privates, they might even follow all the rules and know everything about tango, but they're still not like succeeding. And a lot of times I realized it was having to do with mindset, like how we think about ourselves at the milonga and the fears we have about ourselves. And that was more sort of that emotional, psychological aspect. And for me, it was such a driving force behind my evolution as a dancer. So for me, the podcast became a platform to talk through that, and I guess for myself to articulate those challenges that I've went through, and then other people started reaching out and be like, oh, I'm dealing with that same thing. And so the podcast became kind of this avenue for me to connect with people on that level, where it's more about this very ambiguous abstract space that we all kind of know exists, but we don't really have a language to talk about it at the milonga or like articulate how the fears that we're experiencing. So that was sort of my pathway to expressing that.
So would you say that's like the central theme of your podcast, or is that too narrow?
Well, my tagline became life's drama, one tango step at a time. So I kind of view it as, the reality that tango is this thing that we do together. It's this very specific interest, it's this very niche thing, but I think it brings out some of the more elaborate meta issues of our lives. Like it's like it makes life's large things more manageable to talk about it in tango terms. Like if we're talking about rejection in tango, we can talk about the capaceo, and it's okay because we can discuss that. But ultimately, what are we discussing is how do we feel about being rejected? And that goes much, much deeper. And anybody can relate to that, whether they're in tango or not. And I think right now my podcast is really driven by tango, and I'm talking a lot to tango dancers and really speaking to tango dancers. But I definitely have a desire to go beyond that and connect with people outside of tango, maybe other dances, other dance forms, which I interviewed a dancer recently who was not from tango. That was my first
Hmm.
non-tango interview, non-tango dancer interview. And that was, I would love to connect with other communities as well
They
on that
didn't
level.
come with your tango people didn't come with pitchforks or
Well, I don't know if maybe you're
it's
not.
only half a joke because in a sense like I'm always afraid that once you start posting about something that's not tango then nobody is interested.
Well,
But
there was
it's a
some
nice
drama
experiment.
about it.
Okay.
There was some drama about it because it was about a non-tango dancer who had a negative experience in the tango community. And so it was, it was a good thing to bring up because I think that's another reality, right? Of tango being very insular and
So was that a
not
zouk
very friendly
dancer
to,
or
huh?
was that a zouk dancer?
Yes, it
Yeah,
was
I
the
heard
Zouk.
something about that.
Yeah, yeah. And it's yeah, it was an interesting moment because it was my first experience, and I don't know if you've experienced this as a podcaster yourself, having done this for a while, is it was almost like I caught a moment of like this fever that was rising in the ethers on this issue. And I did the interview, and then it sparked a lot of conversation. And I was like, for a moment, caught in this, vortex of people really
Yeah.
getting fired up about this issue. And it sparked a lot of dialogue. Some of it was not as productive as I was hoping,
Yeah, sure.
but I definitely learned a lot. I learned a lot of like just from watching it unfold and how people make sense of what is being said, and how a lot of times your best intentions of what you're trying to say, you're like, clear as a bell. You think like nobody will misunderstand what you're saying, and then somebody does, and
Yeah.
then can't do anything about it. It's out of your control. So it was a beautiful growing moment for me
Yeah, sure.
as a
Yeah.
podcaster to be like, my job is just to put it out there. I'm not in control of
Yeah, you
what people
can.
are going to
This is what
say.
people tell me. You can't please everyone. Like
Yeah,
sometimes you'll just offend people, or you'll read a hate comment, or like it's just part of the
it's
of
just
putting
part of
yourself
it.
out there. So someone
Yeah.
told me recently, Ayano Yoneda actually told me like you have to be brave to be doing this, and she's also herself like she has her translation project, and she also does things online.
Yes, that's
So
right. With poetry.
yeah, so it's the same for you and anyone else. Like you have to be brave to actually put yourself out there and just post what you want and start a conversation sometimes. And you just have to accept
Yeah.
that sometimes it's not always as pleasant as you hope it is. But I think there's always like it's always productive in some way to put
Yeah.
yourself out there in a way, or like
Yeah.
get people to think about stuff.
I always come back to like that there's always the dark underbelly to anything. And in tango, you know, that is there. Those are those things you're like, oh, I can't believe people could be like that. I can't believe people could say that. And then you see those people you locally, you run into them, you interact with them, and you have that choice. Are you going to talk to them? Are you going to be friendly, even though you know they think this thing that you disagree with? And those are such human issues that it seems like it's only a matter of time before, like, if your podcast succeeds. I remember somebody at some point said to me that, a marker of success is your first hater. Like the first hater that you get
Yeah,
is as a sign that you're getting big enough, that you're reaching a wider enough audience that you know, that's it's a good thing. So I remind myself of that constantly when it comes to tango, because it's really easy to take it personally. I'm sure you felt that too. Like if you say something on the podcast or somebody doesn't agree with your point of view, it's really easy to take it personally. But I just keep coming back to like, my job is just to put it out there.
yeah,
Like I leave after that. I really disconnect, and I've had to become really clear with myself of drawing those really clear boundaries of like, I'm not going to interact with this after this time. I'm not going to like dwell on it. It's my job in a way. Like I treat it, this is my job. I go, I do it, and I leave. And I think that's important to have that
yes.
perspective.
Well, I think you just gave this conversation a really interesting turn because maybe 10 minutes ago you were talking about you were so how about you were so interested in these aspects of tango that have to do with life in general. So things that are reflected in tango but have to do with, for example, your level of self-confidence in life in general, or your insecurities, and we all have insecurities. In this case, I'm saying you as in people. So we all like have these things going on, and we may feel if we're rejected with a cabeceo, with someone we really want to dance with, we may take it really personally, even though we shouldn't. But that reflects something happening in life. So that's what you said pretty much, and then you started talking about how you like that's what your interviews are about, and then you also started talking about how this whole thing impacts you as a person. So it's kind of like you cannot see these things as a separate, like
Yeah.
they all have to do with each other, and like
Sure.
it's all connected.
Yeah. It's true. The boundaries are arbitrary for sure. It's like it's tango has been that way for me for so long. It's like I just kind of see life through that lens all the time. And I'm sure that's the case for most dancers. I don't know if it's conscious or not, but I think I don't know. Is it that way for you? Do you think of life in terms of tango? Do you see like tango metaphors in your daily life?
um That's actually a bit of a tough question because probably yes, but I also try to separate it from
Do you?
yes, but it's just like some people are more like some people are just like some people I meet. For example, I'm sorry to talk about Ayano again. So last time I'll mention someone else, but it's just the perfect example of I asked her. This is an interesting topic for any interviewer, I think. But I asked her like about how much tango she did in for an interview for a video we did, how much like weekly, and it's pretty much like
Mhm.
she's going out every night and she's teaching every day, and I'm like, yeah, there can be so many different like levels of dedication you can have to tango, and in some parts of your life it will be more, and others it will be less. But I do
Mhm.
realize that there are some people who are way more invested in this than I am. And of course, I have been more invested in the past than I am now. But yeah, if you're constantly thinking about tango, then there's probably you're probably pretty deeply in it in a sense. So
I mean, I think it's probably because not only do I do this for work, but everybody I talk to is a tango dancer. You know,
okay,
I like I don't interact with a lot of people outside of tango. So the conversation, the joke about tango dancers, you get together outside of tango, and what do? You talk about tango. Like
yeah,
we don't talk about anything else.
yeah,
So that's kind of the reality for me, I guess. And maybe, the reason even why my husband came onto the banter is because of that. Because, when we go to Milonga together and afterwards we're driving back, we'll like debrief and we'll talk about, okay,
yeah.
which dancers did you dance with? What did you think of the music? And so that's the energy that we wanted to bring to our banters together. Because I think that's the experience that we all have in common.
Yes, yes. So actually, I have tried to consciously put some barriers between tango and other things in my life. And I've noticed that it can be really refreshing to be social with someone who is not in tango, because it's just like I have this joke, like I call tango a sect, and that sounds like a really serious thing, but of course, like it's a bit of a like a half joke again. Like there are some aspects in it
Mhm.
that are it can be very obsessive, and
Oh,
some people
totally.
are really like really addicted. And of course, it's
Yeah.
not like drug addiction, but still, like if it goes at the expense of things, then it can be tricky in people's lives. And I'm not actually sure to what extent that happens, but this is in general with substance abuse, so to say. Like once you feel like it's limiting your life in a way, then probably it would be good to tone down a little bit. But I'm not sure if you ever felt that or heard about that from other
Oh,
people. Do we talk
absolutely.
about that? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I actually did an episode on this where I talked about if tango is an addiction and like how to think about that. But for myself, I was addicted to tango to the point that I sold all of my possessions. I gave away my dogs that I've had for 10 years. And I bought a one-way ticket to Buenos Aires and I was there for almost 7 months, just doing nothing but tango. I was like obsessed. And it was funny because when I first started tango, I remember I was hanging out with an artist friend of mine. I'm an artist by training. That was kind of like my whole life was art back in the day. So I was hanging out with my artist friend, and he's like, there's these stories about these famous artists who leave their life behind and go to Buenos Aires to dance tango. And I was like, that's so silly. Why would they do that? Tango is just whatever. That was like me at the beginning. And a few years later, sure enough, that's exactly what I did. And it did. I think I did it at the expense of a lot of things. I caused a lot of, uncertainty and pain for people in my life. I gave away my dogs, and that was like a big decision. And it felt all worth it. I don't know why, but it just, tango has that power, I guess, to like convince you. But I was there, and then at some point, I came back. I wanted to go back. I went back, and like there was that drive, but at some point it ended for
Hmm.
me. And that's I think I've encountered that from other people that I've seen along the way, is like you just have this thing and you're like, I can't get enough of it. I need it more. And then all of a sudden, or it may be like over a period of a few months, you just sort of like, oh, okay, I'm kind of good. I'm good. I'm done. And that's kind of what happened for me. Now I don't feel the same obsession with it. I think my obsession has taken on more of a creative outlet rather
Yeah.
than it being something more destructive. It's like I am in charge of it rather than it's driving me. That's kind of been a shift, but I think I had to go through that before I got to this place here. But
Yeah.
that's me, you know. I think like the way you talk and you say you set up boundaries between your, tango and the rest of your life. I'm like, oh, that's such a good idea. That's so good to do that. You should totally do. And then like, but for me, I couldn't do that for myself back in the day. I could not set those boundaries. It was like I would sacrifice anything to
And
just keep
now?
doing it,
And now?
Yeah. And
Nowadays?
now,
Yeah.
now it's definitely not it's not the same. It's not the same. It's something that I love, and it's something that I feel expresses me and who I am. Like it's an outlet for my creative expression. It's not something that I have to chase. And I feel very satisfied uh, in the work that I'm doing with my students a lot of times, even more than I might experience at the Milonga, because I really appreciate the process of passing down tango in this very tactile way of like just dancing with someone. So a lot of the dancing that I do is with up and coming dancers who are, training their skills. And somehow at this point in my dance, that's more satisfying sometimes than going out social dancing, which is kind of weird to me to say. I'm like, how is that even possible? But there's this other level of satisfaction. I practice a lot, and that's a new phase of my dance as well. It used to be very much that I just go social dancing, but now I do a lot more practicing where I'll just have somebody, come over to my house, or I go to someone else's and we just practice for a couple of hours. And that's kind of where I'm at with tango. I really appreciate it in different ways. Yeah, much more chill about it. Definitely much more chill. Like everybody right now, everybody around me is going to Buenos Aires. Everyone, oh my God, it's like we're like migrating to Buenos Aires several times a year. There's this huge move. And I feel like I want to go to Buenos Aires eventually, but it's not like it used to be where I was like, oh, I gotta be there, so different phases, I guess.
Yes. And were you a beginner when you went to Buenos Aires, or a new dancer in any way?
Yes, and I apologize. I thought I closed everything that had like a ding, and then I heard a ding, and I hope it doesn't disturb us anymore. But I'll just tell you, yeah, when I first like my very, very first trip, I was pretty much a beginner. Like I think it was maybe a year and a half or so, and I was a follower and very traditional kind of setting. And I started dancing in Texas. So it was like a really small community, very, very few people. My teachers took us. So I was there for just kind of like under 2 weeks. That was like my very first time. And then when I went back, at that point, I was already a few years into it. And I would say I was kind of like a solid intermediate, like,
The
you
seven
know,
months thing.
the what?
7 months, like the 7 month stay. Was that
That,
during
yeah,
that
yeah,
period?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, the 7 month stay I went there, I was kind of like middle of the road. I had pretty good, um, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I don't know where this is coming from. I tried to turn it off.
Well, I'm not
Um,
hearing it, so
oh, you're not hearing it. Okay,
no.
here, I actually found it. Okay, there we go. It's closed now. I hate that thing. Okay, apologies. Um, Yeah, so when I went there for 7 months, I was kind of middle of the road. I had pretty good mechanics I could follow, and so it wasn't like I knew a lot that made me super successful, but I could adapt pretty easily. And so I was there for 7 months, and then the third time I went, at that point, I was already teaching. I was already pretty established in the community. I already knew a lot of people. So I was going back at that point, having had established some relationships with other dancers. So it was a much different trip at that point. And I was starting to lead. And that at that point, that's when I sort of quit after that trip in a way, because um, I sort of got disillusioned with my experience as a follower, I felt like I was in a box. I ended up feeling so stuck because there was only certain leaders who would dance with me, and I couldn't penetrate different circles, and I didn't understand why I wasn't getting dances with other leaders. And I was kind of stuck where I kind of progressed to the top of the food chain in a certain way where I was like definitely good enough to get pretty decent dancers to acknowledge me and dance with me. But then it was like I was ready for the next level, but the next level was not available to me. And I just was like, I was so frustrated. And as a follower, just playing that game of having to sit out tandas and search for, attention. It was just so insulting in a way. So I quit at the time. I decided that I was going to quit. I was tired of it. And I happened at that time to move to LA. And that's when tango kind of like did not let me go. There was already so many people who knew me. And so tango was like the only thing I knew how to do. But at that time, that's when I decided I was going to start leading more. And I retired my heels. Like that trip, I just retired my heels. And I said to myself, I'll put them on when I feel like I really need them. And I just never put them on.
Okay.
So that was kind of the transition.
Yes. So you found new motivation in
Yeah.
learning to
And
dance from the other. It's actually I'm experiencing that the other way around, like with
oh,
following.
cool.
Yeah, because there's not a lot of guys who follow, but I already like followed a bit when I was a student in Buenos Aires when I was a beginner, and then it was really
Uh-huh.
normal to switch roles. But after that, in my most of my tango life, I did not really like consciously follow or take lessons in it. But now I've really felt like I'm feeling this like excitement of a beginner again because when I follow and it's a nice dance, then it's such a different experience than leading. And I still like leading, but I'm kind of tired of it in some ways. Like my what's the word? Like my standards are pretty high for leading. So when I
Mm,
dance with a follower, like there's so many followers who want to dance with me, but like the other way around, I don't
mhm.
always feel the same excitement because some women are better than others, and I just like reinventing myself in several ways, like taking more private lessons for leading, for example, but also the following part. It just kind of reignites the passion a bit.
I'm so glad to hear you say that as a man. I feel
Yeah, yeah,
because most of the time, like I always quote this as an experience to illustrate the overall attitude about men dancing with men that I hear. I was walking into Milonga with my husband, and this guy is next to us, and my husband proposes to the guy that they dance the tanda together because my husband likes to follow as well. And the guy just kind of like, oh, no, no, no. And then he says, I tried gay porn and I'm not into that.
Oh, that's rough. Yeah, 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 yeah.
And I just thought, wow, that's the feeling that you get from this concept of dancing with another man. So there's so much phobia around it. So I'm really excited to hear you talk about this in such a great, really
Yeah,
productive way, because it really is very, very stimulating to work from both sides. And I find that the dances that I have with people who know both roles they're just different. There's such a different experience because there's like this understanding that you have that's deeper because you know both
yeah,
sides of yeah, it's
yes.
beautiful.
And I think as a guy, like women, ultimately, they will really value that if you know how to follow as well. Like at first, they
Hmm.
might think it is a little strange, but I think they can feel at some point that you really know what it is like to lead someone because you can lead or follow only the whole like your whole life, but if you never get to see the other side, like it's for both men and
Yeah,
women, both leaders and followers, if you not never get to see it from the other side, then it's just you're missing out on so much
right.
information and so much fun as well. So like I'm really like actively, of course, this interview is not about me, so I'm not going to talk about this too much, but I just want to say like I'm really pushing a kind of emancipation where Like, why are guys so incredibly nervous about dancing with men, as if as if tango has to be about sexuality or something? Like, um,
Exactly, yeah.
yeah, it's I mostly follow women, by the way, but I do sometimes follow men as well, and it's like I don't feel awkward about it. Like, it's just maybe the first time I did it was a little weird, but it was also a bit weird when I had a full embrace with a woman the first time in my
Hmm.
life. So but to be in
Exactly.
Buenos Aires,
Exactly.
I was feeling like as a beginner, I was like dancing with the open or the practice hold. And then
Uh-huh.
there was like an the owner of the building where the classes was taking place, and my teacher, he went to the bathroom or something, and she just said like, "Let's dance," and then she like
Uh-huh.
embraced me, and I'm like, "What the hell is this?" And I've never really talked about that much with people about the first time you hug someone, but someone on my podcast said at once that it's kind of a cliche that people talk about their first close embrace
Oh,
experience.
wow. Yeah, I mean, I don't remember it exactly, but I remember being very nervous. Like I just remember that feeling of like, that close. And I
Yeah.
know for a lot of women, they share with me when they get into tango that it's like it's too much for people. So I understand that feeling. But as you said, it's just a matter of familiarizing yourself with that experience, and it gets better and better as you get more familiar with it.
So anyway, you found new motivation by starting to lead.
Yeah, I did. I just basically focused on I gave my mindset was this. My mindset was like, you know what? If I'm gonna go back to tango, I'm gonna go back on my terms. I'm not gonna play the game anymore. I don't, excuse my French, give a shit. Like I just was so tired of the game that I felt like I had to play all the time. So I stopped wearing heels. I wore pants most of the time. I stopped wearing dresses. I stopped wearing makeup. I just had this period where I was like, I'm gonna be comfortable. I'm gonna focus on being comfortable and I'm gonna lead. And I knew that that was gonna be useful because there's always enough people sitting who want to dance that I was gonna get enough practice. So I just did that for a while, and eventually I think, people started commenting on my leading, or I started getting more noticed for it. So I started getting better and better dances as a leader, like more and more advanced followers wanted to dance with me, which was kind of like unexpected. But then for me, and I don't know if this is a an experience across the board for women who lead, but I started getting better dances as a follower because of my leading, because there were dancers who would see me lead and were impressed with that, and
Oh,
they would ask me to dance.
okay.
They would expect me to be a good follower. So there are those dancers who think that way. And so I ended up actually getting to dance with all these people that I sort of was like, okay, never mind. I'm not never going to get to dance with them. But a lot of the professional dancers or teachers coming through, like, I started getting all the dances that I wanted. And I was still wearing my flats and I was wearing pants and I wasn't wearing makeup. And so it's kind of like, oh, okay, I get to actually just do it on my own terms and get what I want. And I don't have to jump through the hoops. So that was sort of a light bulb moment for me that it's like maybe tango, it's got all of this etiquette and social dynamics built into it, but maybe it doesn't play as big of a role as we think. Maybe it doesn't have so much power over us as we think. That was kind of my epiphany eventually. So that's kind of what gave me a little bit more courage to keep pushing in that direction and really embrace that image of myself being more of like a tango leader, where people really see me in that way versus that I'm like just a follower who leads. There's like slight distinction there. So yeah, that's been kind of the journey with that.
So you didn't get any backlash from guys when you became a leader, like that they.
Um, yeah, tango dancers are pretty coy when it comes to, like overtly showing their disrespect or their disdain for something. I definitely feel a little bit of like I'd get some dirty looks from milongueros on the dance floor when I would like enter the dance floor next to them, or
You mean in Buenos
certain
Aires or
no, this is in
just
LA. I mean,
okay in
in
LA?
Buenos
Yeah.
Aires, it's not allowed.
No,
At the
no.
time that I was there, it wasn't allowed for most milongas that women would lead. Although I did get to lead, like at they had those queer milongas.
Yeah.
Queer milonga you can go and lead. So I did that. But at most milongas, you're not allowed to lead as a woman. So, but in LA, and just in general and traveling to festivals or something, there's definitely like I can tell there's people who will not look at me or don't want to interact with me or don't acknowledge my presence because of the fact that I'm just not fitting the mold of what they expect. And some of these people are men from Buenos Aires. I tend to be pretty intimidating to men from Buenos Aires a lot of times, like older milonguero types, that they'll just be kind of, yeah, just intimidated, I guess, or not like respecting the fact that I'm a woman in flats, and they just really are attached to that image of a woman in heels. I've also gotten some like online hate about it, but it's like very mild. It's like they'll be like, "Oh, that's so gay." Like a video of me
Really?
leading.
Oh,
Oh, that's
really?
so gay.
Oh,
Yeah, like
I didn't know they did
uh
that with women. Like,
yeah, it's really funny. And then but there was the best comment I've gotten so far was, and it was in Spanish. There's a lot of Spanish speakers actually who've been commenting on my social media, which is really interesting to me. Some of them are like, stop Americanizing our tango,
oh,
or
really?
they like
Okay.
stop making our tango American, or like because I'm like explaining terms that people don't know. They're like, stop, stealing our culture. But then one person said, tango is supposed to be danced between a man and a woman. Like that's the argument. Like this is not tango. Tango is supposed to be between a man and a woman. And so he posted that in Spanish, and I thought about responding, but I was like, I don't need to respond.
Yeah.
But then somebody else came to my defense and basically called him ignorant and was like, and it was all in Spanish where they defended me. And, they were like, not only is she a teacher, so she needs to know both roles, but here where, did you know that men actually learned from men before tango spread around the world? So I think that's mainly what I get is a little bit of this mild, just kind of not liking the fact that I'm sort of not fitting the mold. But
Yeah.
that's about this big of a backlash. But there was like recently there was a podcast episode published on the topic where the two people running it, they were actually talking about female leaders being worse than male leaders, and that that it's not that good, that they're not wearing heels anymore. And so there is that sentiment among certain dancers. And I guess I'm okay with it at this point. I'm on board with the fact that they feel that way, and you know,
Yeah.
moving
I also realized that like it's in the back of my mind when I'm actually posting something that has to do with double roll tango or with anything that does not really fit the traditional image.
on.
But it's just like I don't really care.
I don't either. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's not why I dance. And I know that a lot of people don't dance for those reasons either. Like a lot of people don't go because they really want to like dance with a woman in heels. Like it's not at the top of their mind. But for the older generation, maybe for the more traditional, like old school, people who learned 30 years ago who are really attached to that, I'm okay with I'm okay with them feeling that way. I don't need to dance with them. They don't have to dance with me. It's okay.
Yes, yes. So,
Yeah.
do you actually talk about that on your podcast, like this question of like whether female leaders are less of a leader than men? Like, do you ever talk about that?
Um,
Because I hear that sometimes, like I hear people having opinions on that sometimes, or they say like like it's two sides. Like one says like I know so many good female leaders and they're just as good as men, and then there's some people who think like, yeah,
Yeah,
they're not present enough, or they're not
right,
whatever. But you're gonna have that, like, if male followers were a thing, which it isn't. Like maybe one day it will be. I'm just joking, but maybe like one day it will be just as big as women leading. There will
right,
also be comments like that, like a man cannot
exactly.
follow as well as a woman because he has a tough body and he does not have the soft body. And
Right.
like there may be some truth in that. For example, guys are bigger and women are generally smaller. So when you see a woman leading, like maybe it just looks less macho,
Hmm.
but who cares?
Hmm.
Like if it feels good for both people involved. But
Yeah.
anyway, it's like a popular thing to discuss for people to just have all kinds of opinions on. And I think you are tuned into opinions in general with your type of podcast, so it's
Yeah.
it seems to be interesting to you.
Definitely. No, I've talked about it at length. I mean, it's one of my biggest soapboxes, I think. I end up talking about it in conversation with people as well as on the podcast. I'm due for another discussion on it for sure, because it's at the top of people's minds right now. Um, I understand why somebody might say that there are certain female leaders that don't look macho when they lead. Like that's true. That's a fact that but we're women at the same time. Like, why would we need to be looking macho?
Yeah.
Like, we need to stop being ourselves in order to lead. Like, that makes no sense. But also, for me, that's been a question because I've gotten a lot of compliments over the years from women, but also from leaders. Other leaders have come up to me at different events and said, like, hey, I've been watching you and I really like what you're doing. I respect, your musicality, and it's given me more and more confidence in that way. So I really appreciate that. And but I've had this question in my mind still, like, objectively speaking, how can you tell if, a woman leader is the same quality as a male leader? Like, how would I be able to tell it? It's so subjective. So there's been this sort of doubt to it. But honestly, what kind of now gives me a bit more hope that it's like the view is changing is that I competed in the tango championship recently here,
Oh,
the SoCal Tango Championship, as a leader in my category. It was the Jack and Jill category, which is where you switch partners and you never dance with the same person. So it's very much improvisational. It's very much that category is driven more for like the social tango, kind of what you would see at a milonga, those kind of skill sets. So I competed in that and I placed third. I got third place in that competition as a leader, as a woman. So in a way, I'm like, okay, so there is at least objectively out there an opinion by a panel of judges that the way I look as a leader, the way I dance is pretty much fits the mold of some kind of that we might have about leading in tango. So it puts to rest this question of whether women are capable of measuring up to the grace and the virtuosity of male leaders. Like, that's possible, absolutely. And now that that's put to rest, I think we can move on and talk about, okay, so what does it take? What does it take for someone who has been trained to be very receptive and very pliable and soft and very responsive to transform into a mountain? And like I call it, leaders, you have to support, you have to be grounded, you have to learn to align your body in a new way. Like you said, the same thing for leaders who are going to start learning to follow. You have to learn the opposite. You have to give up some of that control and be pliable and responsive. So that's really the work for any woman who decides to start leading and transform into a leader. It's like and I had to learn that too, that because at first when I was leading, I very much had a lot of movement. I had a lot of
hmm.
like, this kind of thing going on because I'm a follower at first. So at some point, somebody said to me, it doesn't matter whether the woman is a follower or the man is a leader. What matters is that you have the yin and the yang. You need the opposites. You need the meeting of the opposite forces. You need someone to be the receptive, pliable, organic, and you need something to be the steady, kind of force behind it. And that to me was like, okay, so when I lead, it's very much about me becoming more of that like embodiment of a masculine energy. It's not that I'm a man,
No, no,
it's
no.
that I'm finding the masculine aspect inside myself and I'm
Yes.
projecting that.
And there's absolutely
And so
nothing
to
wrong with
me,
that, right?
yeah, and the same for, if I see you dancing beautifully as a follower, I'm not gonna be like, he's a woman, like it'll be like, oh, beautiful feminine movement from your body. It's amazing. So I think that ultimately the reason why there's a conversation, even about women being less or better as leaders, is a sign that there is now enough women leaders that there needs to be a conversation, which I take as a good sign. I think it's a great sign that there's enough of us and that, you know, I hope enough women will get angry enough about being, you know, thought of as less than that we really, I don't know, own it, like really own our power. Because every woman who is coming to tango as a leader, having been a follower, is already equipped with so much technique and so much musicality.
Yeah.
All they need is just a little bit of like instruction on, posture and vocabulary. So it's not that big of a leap as they think. So yeah, that would be my take on it.
Yeah, it's the other way around as well. Like you bring some advantages over people who are totally new.
Absolutely.
And you may
You're
have
not like a
some.
beginner dancer, right? Like you're not
Yeah,
starting from scratch. And people
yeah,
think that. They come to that with this mindset, like, I've never done this. I'm like, you've been doing it. It's just a matter of,
yeah.
shifting perspective.
Yes, that's also how it feels in practice for me. Like it's still the same dance, right? Like you have a different role, and it's actually a thing
Hmm.
you need to take very seriously because it's like a whole learning process, and you need to do things really fundamentally different in a way, but still it's the same dance and the same music, and the embrace is still there. So
Yeah.
I actually have a friend
Yeah.
who have like a woman who have led for many years, and I now also usually follow her as well. So we just switch during the tanda evenly. And I always say like I have the same connection with you, whether you're leading or following, like because she leads as well. And
Oh,
then
oh, that's
it's just the
beautiful.
same. Yeah. And what's funny, like what happened to me yesterday, so I was at this local encuentro, and there was a woman from abroad, and she actually she may be listening to this once I upload it, so that's funny because she's a fan of this of my interviews, and probably of yours as well, or if she's not already, then she'll find out through this video. But she actually led me to also give me a chance to be visible, because the visibility issue is can be really
Mm,
tough for men who want to follow. And then I said like, yeah, it's like you as a guy, if you want to follow, it's like you already need to be like really skilled to even get considered. And then she
mhm,
said like, yeah, it's the same for female leaders. Like a lot of women, they will only, that's what she said, maybe you don't agree, but what she said is like a lot of women will only really take you seriously, or you there will be way higher standards for you as a woman who's leading than for like some guys who've been doing this for 30 years and still can't properly lead an ocho. I mean, it's kind of cynical in a way, but I guess that's just the normal patterns, and people just love these normal patterns of behavior, and then when you're starting to change that, it will meet some resistance, even though when people are not necessarily really against it, but they'll, yeah, it's
yeah,
just like that's the emancipation thing. Like anything that's
yeah.
unusual, or like it needs to be fought for, in a sense.
Yeah, I think ultimately it's still the case that most women, when given a choice between dancing with an advanced female leader and advanced male leader, or sorry, female leader and male leader who are advanced, both, I think most women will choose to dance with men.
Yeah, why?
Like
Because
that's still gonna be the preference.
I actually discussed that with someone who's also an expert like you. But I want to know your answer. What's your answer? Why is that?
Why?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I don't know. To me, it seems obvious just because, like, if it's heterosexual women who are going to dance and there's like an advanced leader who wants to dance with them, and there's going to be that aspect to it where it's like we like the attraction. I mean,
Yeah,
I
do you
think
think
I've
so?
even,
Okay, okay.
totally.
Because the other person I talked to said it was more about, for women it was not necessarily like the sexual part or the sensual part or
That's
whatever.
absolutely true
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
I
yeah,
do agree with that. Like I always say that, men go to Milonga to dance with women. Women go to the Milonga to dance, period.
yeah. I
Like I
mean,
think for the
I don't,
most
but
part,
yeah, for the most part, it's totally true. Yeah,
for
yeah,
the most part, I
yeah,
think
yeah,
that
yeah.
can be, a statement. There's exceptions to the rule. So I do think that's the case, but I still think as well, because I hear women do this happens a lot, right? You have a bunch of women who are wanting to dance, and the capaseo happens, and all the men, the capaseo matches happen, and people leave, and the women are looking at the men, and they will not look at the other women
Oh, really?
until they realize
Ah,
that there's no more men left.
okay.
That's when they're going to agree to dance with the woman. I've gotten capacea that way. That's a strategy for me sometimes. I'm like, I just wait until, that some people they don't get the capacea. And I'm okay with that. That's totally fine. That's actually why I lead in a way. It's like, yeah, exactly. I'll dance with you because no, there's nobody else. I'll dance with you. So, however, if we did not have a problem with gender imbalance, I don't know if I'd be leading,
Hmm.
right? Like I wouldn't have the incentive to lead necessarily at the time that I was leading. Like maybe I would get to that the way you got to your place where I'm just bored with the role and I want to learn another role, right? But I started leading because really I wasn't getting enough dances. So if I was getting more dances with leaders of the level that I wanted, I wouldn't have the incentive to dance with other women. So I think both can be true here, that it's kind of a blessing in disguise, but it's also, something that we wish was different. I think both are true. So that would be my opinion.
Yes, but so you would still think that for women in general there is some sense of I want to dance with a man as well. Like not just
Sure.
like coming to dance, but also they wanna be held by a man or something.
I think women want to feel that masculine energy, and it's been a conscious focus on my part in my own dance to give that to women. And I
Yeah,
know
yeah, yeah,
sometimes I can,
yeah,
and I can do it to the level that I feel I would want, right? But it also requires for the other women to be very open to that, because it's very easy for women to go there with men because we've been doing it all our lives. It's very easy for us to feel sensual and attracted in that moment. Like that sensual part of tango is it's there, right? We want to feel sexy. Like as a woman, when I dance, I want to feel sexy. I want to feel like I'm attracted to the person I'm dancing with. I want to feel that passion. By the time the tanda's over, I'm like, okay, thank you, goodbye.
yeah,
We're
sure,
done. But inside
yeah,
of that 12 minutes, I want to feel that. So it's easy for me to feel that with certain men, for sure. I don't necessarily feel the same with women. And I don't think that I would say like, oh, I can dance only with women and never miss this other side of like dancing with somebody who's like really, embodies that masculine energy and is a man. Like I want that for sure. But I say also that dancing with women is this additional dimension of my dance that almost, I don't know, balances it out or creates enough contrast that I enjoy both because there's such a contrast, because they are so different. So it's not like one is better than the other. It's like they inform each other. And I even sometimes I do experiments when I go dance and I'll say, okay, for the next hour, I only dance as a leader. And for the hour after that, I only dance as a follower. And I'll just kind of compare my experience. And it's always very interesting to do that because it kind of puts you in a different state of mind. And just like I want to develop those sensual parts of myself as a woman, and I want to I want to embody even more of that organic quality of the femininity. The same way when I dance, I'm like, okay, my avatar is Clark Gable, the actor from the 50s, and I'm like, all right, here we go. Like I'm gonna really embody that. And it's just fun. It's fun to play back and forth between those two. Um, and I think, yeah, like that's kind of what it's interesting for me as a dancer.
Yes, what I like is that you are essentially promoting people to have role freedom, but you're also
Oh, oh,
acknowledging.
freedom.
Yeah, that sounds a bit strange. Yeah, yeah,
I
but
love
yeah,
that.
yeah, yes. No, but you're also at the same time you are also acknowledging that there is something going on with masculine and feminine energy, and I don't like tango where the original roles are stripped of all their meaning. I think you
Mm,
can have it both ways in a sense. Like you can um dance however you want, but you can also understand that these roles are originally based on masculine and feminine energy. And then as a guy, when you're gonna follow like me, like I just want to feel something of that femininity, and I don't need to wear
hmm
high heels to do that. It's just like it's already in the movements, and you
exactly.
don't have to like do all kind of exaggerated adornos to look like a miss like a beauty contest
Right.
participant or something. Like it's not that like literal, but there's still things
hmm
going on, and it's really beautiful. I think, for example, there's a lot of women nowadays who are really like in these like really roles with a lot of responsibility, and they're always like in this more dominant energy, for example at work. And that's totally fine, because that's why women have the choice to be
hmm
out there and have very demanding jobs. But then I've also think it's really nice if they can come to tango and just uh follow and just feel that more receptive energy. And I also like feeling that different role, that I'm not always like in tango, like I'm always this guy who's this macho in a way and leading like an Argentine. Like I feel like that's the
hmm
role I'm supposed to play, and it's fine because I have that in me. It's naturally, organically inside myself. So I've never really seen that as a problem. But I also like it when I can just play the other role, and why not, right?
hmm
So
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like that it's on limits. You choose which one you want to do. It's not like somebody's judging you out there, like taking notes on your boleas or something. Like it's really up to you. I think the respect for the culture and its origins can be there right alongside of saying like, wow, I'm living in the 21st century and I'm going to take this art form and I'm going to experiment and follow my curiosity and use it as a tool for my own creative expression. Like, yeah, I'm all about that.
yes. So I'm specifically saying that because I don't really like it when tango becomes something without a flavor. And I think there's a risk
hmm
of that sometimes abroad, like in some tango communities, that when I look at the way some people dance, like I just don't see any real identity in it, or they're probably having fun and it's fine, but I'm missing some kind of like passion. And I think it definitely has to do with really understanding where this dance came from, and what the
Mm,
like yin and yang mean. And
yeah,
that's just one part of it. Like there's also, for example, the language and the lyrics and the culture and the milongas of Buenos Aires. And so it's a
so
combination
much.
of like freedom of doing whatever you want, but also realizing in a sense that um, it's not like ballet or something. Like it's not like all these whatever, like ballroom
Yeah,
dancing. Like it's still like a
right.
cultural context, and you got to understand it.
Yeah, I think tango is interesting because it's not a formalized art form, like you said, the way ballet is. Thank God it wasn't like codified to that extent. But it's also not fully like folkloric type of tradition, like where it's completely passed down through just, communities. Like there is a taught element, there is a codified element to it, but it's also like it resists codification. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And I think that's its fuel in a way, that this tug of war where we want that liberated, like feeling of like, but I don't want the box. I want to go outside the box. But then also this understanding that, okay, but you have to break the rules within the structure. It has to still belong. Otherwise there's that tension between it. So I feel like that's what makes tango tango. That tension, both like within the embrace on the micro level, but also on this macro level, how tango positions itself inside communities. There's always that conflict because on the one hand, it's an art form, but on the other hand, it's very much like a product. It's something for people to purchase. It's a service. It's a social product, and yeah, the way we negotiate those two is going to always be kind of a point of conflict, I think.
Yes. So I think this interview didn't quite have the structure I originally wanted it to have, but it doesn't matter because essentially your channel is and your whole thing as a content creator is about questions like this. So I just want to ask maybe in the remaining time, is this also how your uh content was born essentially? Because we talked about your whole journey and how you became a leader and
Hmm.
why. And is this like this, and also that just the addiction of tango was not like just the tango dancing itself was not enough to keep you so
Right.
engaged, and then you found other ways, outlets for that. And I mean, the same happened to me. Like I sometimes I enjoy more like making content or editing videos or than
Hmm.
actually going to dance, even though I really like dancing. But I also like I have limited time, so I need to choose, right? And so what I just want
Yeah,
to know from you for like the remaining whatever 10 minutes, 15 minutes is like
sure.
to just make the circle like complete. So how did
Yeah.
how did you end up doing this?
Um, so I was actually, I'm trained as an artist, as I mentioned before. I went to school for an art degree. I have a master's in art, fine arts, and art history. So my training is really, as an artist, is my foundation for my content creating in a way. Because when I was in art school, what eventually became very interesting to me was what was called interactive arts, like basically art that was born from interactions with people versus it being something that's on the wall. But, at that time, that idea was really radical. And when I went to Buenos Aires for 7 months, as part of that trip, I actually got into an artist residency. That's how I justified going to Buenos Aires for 7 months and selling my possessions. I got into an artist residency there, and I did a project that entailed me exchanging um, different types of art with different artists and having them contribute. So I made video, and then another artist would make a soundtrack, and then the final product of that was this show that was kind of like a collaboration between different people. So I was always really interested in this idea of collaborative efforts with people that are not in my physical presence. And so that was kind of the birth of just some of my attempts. I was doing some of my early attempts to like log my journey. I had a blog that I was writing. I was starting to post on social media a little bit, making videos. I did some lives. I would like do live drawings and things like that. And those were like just early um, attempts to get comfortable being like visible online. It was a very uncomfortable journey for a long
What
time.
what year was that, more or less?
This was like 2015, 2016.
Oh, it's funny. That's the
When
same
I
time
was
as I started writing
really?
about Buenos Aires, and I was really uncomfortable
Wow.
with the sudden attention I got because of the what I wrote, and it I had so many people comment like your way of writing is great, and so many
Yeah.
followers, and like it's just you need to get like I learned
Yeah.
somewhere in a podcast that has nothing to do with tango that it takes like for your ego, so to say, like ego is usually used in a
Mm,
negative way, but like your self-identity it lags behind the actual like fame you get. And of course, we're not famous like
interesting.
a film star, but still in tango,
Yeah,
you can get kind of famous for certain merits. And
totally.
your mind just lags 1 year or 2 years behind the actual. It's really crazy. So
That's a
I
great
understand
way of
that you
thinking about it.
struggle in the
Hmm.
beginning. You struggle with this visibility, and like you said in the beginning of this interview, so it still really became a meta conversation that you
Hmm.
struggled with the fear of hate comments or whatever. You said something like
Hmm.
that,
Yeah.
more or less. And well, this is also an example. Like you need to really decide. So, am I going to do this, and what are the consequences? Maybe you think about that, and maybe as a woman, there are additional things that you may struggle with than I did as a guy. Who knows? But it's just yeah. Sorry, I interrupted your story, but it's just yeah.
No, it's great. I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
That's so
resounded with me
cool.
like it. I don't know what the right word is. It like it. I think it's Spanish resounded, but it's like it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it
Resonated?
resonated. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, no, totally. And it's funny because that's when I also started my YouTube channel and I just started doing like some little tutorials um and then, it wasn't until COVID that it really pushed me fully into it. I think COVID was sort of this big push and into like the world of online and really committing to developing my creativity in that way. And at first, it felt very unnatural and kind of, there's so much stigma around social media. There's so much hate around social media. People are very conflicted about how to feel about it, and it's got this very powerful hold on us. But people have a lot of fear, and I was like that. I had a lot of fear around it as I'm trying to do it. So it was a big conflict in me. But during COVID, I ran this online milonga called Earth Virtual Milonga
yeah. I heard
for
about that once. Yeah, yeah,
years.
yeah,
And it gave me so much opportunity to be online in front of people, to get used to like being on camera,
yeah,
to lose that
yeah. No,
nervousness.
nobody ever talks about that in tango, but like,
It's been it was such a great training in a way because that those first times that I hosted it, I mean, the panic attacks were real.
oh, really? Okay, okay. Oh,
Yeah, it was
yeah,
really hard. And then even now, like people ask me, "Oh, you must be so comfortable like now that you're doing so much content. It must be so easy for you to just like get in front of a camera and like do it." And I always say it's like the cringe factor is still there. It's always there. Like it never goes away. It's just a matter of like getting used to feeling it, I guess. And so COVID was that time for me to really get used to it. And that's when I think I started getting more focused. I started um, doing more coaching too, because since I decided I wasn't going to be like the traditional teacher pursuing, traveling around the world. And after COVID, like that wasn't going to be my direction. I was like, I need to be online and I need to develop myself online. So I really got really focused during COVID. I think that was the time that it got more serious. So yeah, and I still feel like I'm still getting ready in a way. I don't know, like there's so much you can do with content. There's so many ideas. And as an artist, when I finally lost that, I guess that stigma around social media, and I just accepted it as a medium, the way a painting is a medium, that the social media is just my canvas to project what's valuable to me and share what's inspiring, then that kind of clicked more of a sort of an agreement inside myself that it's like, okay, I'm an artist. This is my art. My content is my art. I care about it deeply. It's very valuable to me. It's very important that it's of high quality. And I'm just going to really surrender to that reality and not have not leave anything behind. Just like give it in my all, you know.
yeah,
So kind of where I'm
yes,
at.
yes. So you're do you ever like find any difficulties in yeah, how do I say that? Like any burnout, or are
Oh
you
yeah, yeah, yeah. I did have a burnout. Everybody that I talked to at the beginning of this journey said to me like, "There's going to be a burnout." I mean, you go through multiple burnouts, but I did have a burnout last year in the fall. And I thought it was going to be a couple of weeks. It ended up being like 3 months. And during that 3 months, I was like kind of doubting everything I've ever done and questioning my existence and, all of those things. And then when the new year hit, I had a moment of decision because I was kind of like on the fence and I
Yeah.
needed to just sort of decide which way I was going to
This year,
go.
you mean? Just this new
Hmm.
year. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And I decided to give it another year. That
Oh,
was my
really?
decision.
Oh,
It's
cool.
like, because I was looking at this thread and somebody said, when you're an entrepreneur and you start something, when do you decide that it's done? Like when do you give up? Like what's the marker? And everybody in the thread said 3 years. 3 years is the marker. Like if after 3 years your business doesn't become profitable, that's when you move on. And I was like, all right, well, I've been at it for 2 years, so
2 years.
3 years
Okay.
to go.
Okay.
So I'm gonna, yeah. So yeah, because at the beginning of COVID is when I was like, all right, this is gonna be my life. I'm really gonna go at it. It's something that's really interesting to me. I'm really mesmerized by it. It's scary. It's just the thing that I need.
Yes.
Uh, and so this is my third year really building it out and building my presence on social media and building my following. And it's becoming more exciting as I'm understanding, like, how tango is really hard at first, and then it's like, oh, okay, I get it. So I've kind of just gotten to that place in my work with social media where it's like, oh, okay, all right, I understand what I'm doing. So it feels less intimidating now than it did before. So
Yes. Yes. But you're also doing like teaching in person, right? Like in groups locally. So that's also a
yeah,
compliment. Like I always like say that when you to prevent burnout from happening, um it's really good to see like if you can have several like pillars, like not just always do the only this one thing, but see if you can divide your attention between certain different
absolutely.
aspects, right? And it's good if you, for
Yeah.
example, if you're teaching
Yeah.
in person, then it's not just about the YouTube channel.
Yeah, and honestly, all of my social media serves the
Because
purpose.
sorry, but you seem really obsessed still with tango in so many ways. So like I'm sure
Yeah,
it's
yeah, for
there's a lot of
sure.
perspective for you in it.
Yeah, I think social media that I do is for the service of the people that I end up teaching. A lot of it is based on my lessons with people. I'm answering questions that people ask me about
Okay.
mechanics. And so it's very much driven by my work with my students. And also, I think what was lacking for me before, which was very difficult for me to learn, because I'm such an artistic mind and I'm so nonlinear, is structure. Structure ultimately, structuring my day, being more disciplined, not going to bed at 1 a.m. anymore, like just committing to a regular sleep schedule and putting in place a kind of a structure that supports me working and then resting enough and having other parts of my life be in balance. So my driven obsessive behavior with tango that I was doing when I first started, like I can't build a career, a business while doing that. Like I just had to realize that for myself and consciously say, okay, the burnout is real. So let's make sure that you're monitoring so the burnout is not happening in this way. So it's made me a lot more responsible as a human being, I think, to myself for my own health and like my own health and well-being, because tango and this project that I've been working on now for, I feel like it's been in the works for over a decade. It's all consuming, so it can definitely be a very imbalanced way of life. So I tend to be very committed to like a structure these days to help me.
So you make sure you do other things as well than tango.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I tango is definitely a daily activity for me in some way, but I also do a lot of like exercise. I walk, I do yoga. I have a lot of house projects that I just sort of like, I want to turn off, unplug, and go build something with my hands and plants. I'm into plants a lot. That's been
Okay.
my like other
Okay.
hobby. So there's a lot of that time away. And that's why, I'm an introvert. And I find that even though I love being with people, I love interacting with people, I love talking with people, I just need a lot of time alone and just like not talking, just writing, reading something, So I need a lot of that now. Whereas before I was like, just sleep and go, dance
Yeah,
tango all day long,
yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was a really interesting opportunity to talk to someone who's doing
Yeah.
something similar, and it
Yeah,
was
I
more
feel
than
like
just
I
an.
now have all these questions that I want to ask you. So maybe we'll have to do a follow-up interview on my podcast
Sure, sure, why
where
not?
I talk to you.
I think people will love that because I'm usually
I
the
think
one
that would
doing
be
the
fun.
yeah, for my audience at least, like I'm always doing the interviews and not really like sometimes I make it into like I turn it a bit into a conversation, like an exchange. But usually
Hmm.
I'm more like the guy who asks the questions, and like I
Yeah.
did a like before I did my own interviews I was like I was asked for an interview on another channel, and
Uh-huh.
yeah, I actually talked about something I was quite knowledgeable about something in tango music history during the whole interview, and it was such a different experience than always being the person who drives the
Yeah,
conversation. And it's that's really interesting. I also like it when it
totally.
becomes like today, when it also becomes an exchange. Like I also showed something of myself today instead of just asking questions, and it's I think some people really enjoy that when it's also a bit of a real like natural exchange going on. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yes, and so I'm sure we'll talk again, but I think
Yes,
I'm sure people
please.
really enjoyed this unusual conversation, and it goes to
I hope
show.
so.
It really goes to show that even after so many interviews, like I did about 100, I think,
Wow.
there's still so many ways you can have refreshing conversations with people, and like some people say, like someone told me there's so many things to talk about within tango, and that's true. Like,
Hmm.
sure, it would be easier to have a channel about psychology or something, and that you can like you can just pick whatever you want. So it's the
Yeah.
scope is a bit more niche, but
Yeah.
still, like the whole point of this video, like of your channel, is like you're trying to see these connections between psychology and tango. And
Hmm.
that's also true for this. Like you can talk about that endlessly, or like people's level of confidence and how they dance and how they can
Exactly.
become more self-confident by leading, for example. Or it's just whatever. So many like perspectives. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you for letting me share it. I get what you're saying because I now got to do that and to really talk at length, and it was really fun to go down those rabbit holes with you.
yeah, sure.
So I look
Well,
forward to learning more about you next time we talk.
yes. Okay. Thank you, and see you next time.
Okay. Have a great one.